Babysitting wasn't the job I imagined having while I was a senior in high school. I was paid a decent rate per hour for watching kids who only needed to have an adult around when their parents were out. After all, it wasn't that tough of a job, as most of the time it was during night hours. All I needed to do was wait until the children fell asleep, and then I was free to do my own stuff. I usually did my schoolwork during that time. This was just another job on a Thursday night. I drove to the house, got there exactly on time, and met the parents. They were newly moved to the town. They had a party and told me that they would be gone for 5 to 6 hours. It was already 6:30, so this was another late job. They introduced me to their kids, Harry, who was around 10, and Jenny, who was around 6 or 7 years old. They also told me that this was their first time leaving their kids home alone with someone, and they were sensitive. I assured them not to worry, and I'll take good care of them. When the parents left, I watched a cartoon show with them for some time. They were quiet and innocent kids. Around 7:40, I told them it was time to go to bed, but they insisted on playing with me. Finally, I agreed on the condition that after playing, they would go to bed straight away. They agreed, and I asked them what they wanted to play. Jenny said something very weird. She wants to play hide and seek. I was kind of confused and asked her who said that. She replied, "My friend." It was really awkward because there was no one else around except for us three. But she was a little kid after all. I thought she might have an imaginary friend, so I just brushed it off at that time. I asked them to hide, and I would find them after counting down from 1 to 10. The house was large, making it a perfect place for hide and seek, and it was difficult for me to find them as I wasn't familiar with the layout. I counted down from 1 to 10 and opened my eyes. They were gone. I started searching for them, calling out their names as I moved through the hallways. The kids raced through the rooms, giggling and enjoying the thrill of the chase. I heard their footsteps running up the stairs, and I followed them. The stairs led to a big, dimly lit hallway. I was slowly taking my steps forward while telling them I was going to find them. That's when I saw something strange. I saw 3 children running instead of 2, who went into the room at the end of the hallway and closed the door. My heart raced. I thought I must have mixed things up because of the low lighting. I approached the room they went into. I was about to open the door when a chill ran down my spine. I heard 3 different voices. I didn't know how that was possible. I hesitated and quickly opened the door, but it was locked from the inside. I asked them to open the door right away, still hearing that 3rd voice. Suddenly, the door unlocked. I rushed in, and when I entered, I saw both of them sitting on the floor, each playing with a doll. If they were both sitting there, then who opened the door? I was kind of scared. I checked the whole room to see if anyone else was present, but I found no one. I sat on the floor near them and asked what they were doing. Harry replied, "We are playing." I asked them who opened the lock, and Jenny said she opened it, while pointing to a side where there was no one but a doll on the floor. I asked them about the doll, but they said, "She is playing with us." I was shocked. I had never been that scared before. I asked them to go to sleep right away. I laid them back in their beds, turned off the light, and rushed back downstairs to the hall. I really wanted to leave, but I couldn't leave the kids alone with whatever that thing was. I spent the rest of the time waiting for their parents to return. When the parents got home, I told them I saw someone and heard something unusual, but they did not respond to that and pushed me away, saying that I was overthinking and it was just my mind playing tricks on me. They were acting strangely, so I went back to my house. Something very strange had definitely happened. Luckily, they didn't call me back. I still don't know if I would have agreed to babysit their children again. I have been babysitting for the Wattersons for a long time. They wanted to travel to the south for the weekend, and wanted me to watch over their kids. I agreed, because they were paying well and it was just for a couple of days. Another plus point was that their kids, George and Janet, were really well-behaved and very calm. On Friday night, I went to their house, which was in an elegant area and a little isolated from the rest of the city. Mrs. Watterson gave me their cell numbers as well as a landline where I could contact them in case of emergencies. They left, and I got settled in. Shortly after, I put the kids to bed. George was 8 years old, and his little sister, Janet, was 5. They weren't very restless and soon fell asleep. Since it was still very early for me to go to bed, as I'm more of a night owl, I grabbed a book from Mr. Watterson's library and started reading it on the couch. I was halfway through the first page when my cell phone rang. I answered, but there was only silence on the other end. I said hello a few more times, but there was no response, so I hung up. I started reading again. After a few minutes, a sound of someone talking inside the house interrupted me. I looked at the clock. It was around 10. The kids couldn't be awake at this hour. It would be better to go check, so I headed towards their rooms. I peeked through the door of Janet's bedroom. She was deeply asleep. That was really strange, so I opened the door and looked around. "George, are you here?" I called. No response. I went to check in his room and he was in his bed, sleeping. I backed away and closed the door. I was beginning to feel really uncomfortable with all of this. My phone started ringing again, and I picked it up once more. Nobody answered me. However, I heard ragged breathing on the other end, which was really creepy. I started to panic. The breathing pace increased, and I hung up. I passed by the security camera monitor and stopped when I saw the kids. Janet was sound asleep while George's bed was empty. Suddenly, a black movement quickly passed in front of the screen in George's room. Fear enveloped me when I realized it could be an intruder in the house who took George while I was distracted. I rushed upstairs and entered his room. There was no one there. I looked at the closet and approached it. Swallowing hard, I opened the doors to see that there was no one inside. At that moment, I heard noises in the kitchen. "George, is that you?" I shouted his name as I went downstairs. I approached the kitchen door slowly and could see George. He was talking, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. He was making hoarse noises from his throat, but it seemed like he was talking to someone. He was standing in the middle of the kitchen, looking up as if he was addressing someone tall. I could see tears in George's eyes. I called him, but he did not respond. Suddenly, George went still and suddenly turned to look at me. He had completely dark eyes. It was the strangest thing I had ever seen. Gently, I asked him to go to bed as I guided him towards his room. I put him into his bed and stayed by his side. "Who were you talking to, George?" I asked him. He did not answer me and simply looked at me before closing his eyes. He soon fell asleep. I went down and called the Wattersons. I told them that George had been acting strangely and asked them to come as soon as possible so that I could tell them what happened. This was not something I could tell them over the phone. The Wattersons returned shortly after, and I told them everything. I was very scared because I knew that George was not alone in that kitchen. There was someone with him. The Wattersons told me that this had happened before, and it was nothing to worry about. It was just George sleepwalking, they said. But I knew it was something much more than that. They canceled their trip, and I returned to my house. That was the last time I babysat for their kids.
Subscribe to the channel to hear the strangest stories of encounters with the unknown. I'll tell you the best tales of horror, mystery, and suspense. When whispers and shadows lurk in the darkness, the time for nightmares has come.
On that particular evening, it was just me and the kids. It wasn't unusual. I'd watched them many times before. Our routine was simple: playtime, bedtime, and then awaiting the return of their parents. After reading them a story and making sure they were asleep, I went to the living room to wait for their parents. The house's silence was only punctuated by sporadic creaking, the aging wood adjusting itself. Quickly scrolling through TV channels, a soft giggle broke the quiet. Initially, I assumed that the kids woke up and were chattering, but then I heard it again. It came from the basement. A chill swept over me. The echoes got stronger. It could be my imagination, or perhaps a forgotten toy making the noise. I tried concentrating on the TV. Regardless, I couldn't shake off the persistent sound. I told myself, it's nothing, no need to fuss. Yet, deep down I knew it wasn't true. Odd fears filled my thoughts. The laughter that echoed just wouldn't stop. My worry that something was horribly off in the basement grew stronger. The night drew on, and the basement's laughter continued, becoming louder. Trying to clear my mind, I thumbed through some books. My phone's screen offered a distraction, but the sound never faded from my focus. Unsettling feelings kept haunting me. Was it my overreacting nerves? Or was it just the emptiness of the house making normal sounds eerie? Trying to deny them was pointless. The laughter seemed to grow unbearable, becoming harder to ignore. Eventually, I felt like I had to check it out. Slowly and carefully, I made my way to the basement door. I could feel my heart pounding on my chest. As I went down the stairs, I thought I could hear laughter echoing. It filled the air in a weird way and was kind of creepy. I got to the bottom of the stairs but stopped, not sure if I should turn on the light. I took a deep breath and hit the switch. The basement was filled with a shaky light that wasn't really strong. And I noticed the toys. They were exactly as they had been left, sitting on the shelves nicely. The laughs became quiet, but the sound hung in the air, making me shiver. I looked around the room, seeing shelves filled with old toys. I slowly walked towards the shelves, feeling a weight over my shoulders. The toys were still, with smiles on their faces, unmoving. Everything felt normal, exactly like I expected. I let out a tense giggle, criticizing myself for my wild thoughts. Perhaps the sound of laughter was just in my brain, part of being up late and nervous. Yet, even as I tried to brush away the discomfort, a tiny bit of uncertainty remained. Something about the basement's quietness and how shadows moved made me nervous. I stopped, and after a few deep breaths, aiming to ease the worry scratching at the corners of my mind, I decided to go back to the living room. After a last check of the surroundings in the basement, I turned to the stairs. Just as I was leaving, something moved in my peripheral vision. At first, it seemed like blur, just the shadows moving in the dimly lit place. But it happened again, a slight, barely noticeable movement. My heart jumped. One of the toys, a doll, seemed to move its head. I stopped, breathing hard. A strange feeling swept over me. It seemed the doll was alive. I blinked, expecting it to stop, but the doll's glassy eyes were still looking at me with a creepy focus. A rush of fear started to take over me. I was overcome by confusion. How could this be happening? Was I not seeing things right? Am I going crazy? The fear spread over me, intense and heavy. I wasn't by myself. I felt that something else was in the basement. It felt like it was observing me, waiting. Scared, I backed off, just wanting to run before whatever was there came for me. Every inch of my body screamed at me to flee, to get as far away from the basement as possible. But my feet felt heavy, glued to the ground. Suddenly, the doll moved again, this time more forcefully. It jerked forward, its limbs contorting in unnatural ways, a creepy smile spreading across its painted lips. With all I could muster, I forced myself to move, spun around, and sprinted up the stairs. The creepy doll's laugh still rang in my ears. I found myself in the living room, gasping for air, and managed to shut the basement door. After catching my breath and recollecting my thoughts, I quickly went to the kids' room. I breathed easy, seeing them asleep safe and sound. I wondered if I could have just imagined it all. I switched every light on, waiting for the parents to get home. When they finally arrived, I quickly said goodbye, lying about plans I had for the next day, and rushed out. I left the house with a weird feeling. I remembered the scary stuff inside. I promised myself, no more babysitting here. That night still haunts me. When I look again at the pitch-black windows, I sense something evil is still there, ready for the next person who has no clue.